Hey everyone, chaomix here. I think it goes without saying that there are a lot of janky Sonic games out there, especially when looking at the abundant amount of spin-off games. Particularly the spin-offs from the mid to late 90s, aka the first dark era of the Sonic series, which graced us with bizarre games like Sonic Labyrinth, Sonic Spinball, and of course, who could possibly forget, Sonic Schoolhouse.
I'm Sonic. Click on me for help.
Because after the release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, we wouldn't really get another mainline game until Sonic Adventure in 1998. So the time in between these two games were filled with all sorts of weird experimental games. Some are decent, others are meh.
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
But man, I gotta admit, while almost all of these games are bad, they're still somehow super enjoyable, even if only ironically. There's this weird thing that happens with me where basically I'll like something ironically for long enough until it eventually becomes unironic. This is the case, at least for me, with a lot of these unconventional 90s Sonic spin-off games. But there's at least one exception. There's one game that I absolutely adore and always have since the beginning, and that is Sonic R. Sonic R is kind of a cult classic among the fan base. Please, join our cult. I mean, like I mentioned before, it's kind of janky like a lot of these other spin-off games, but I don't think this renders the entire game obsolete. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people that do think this way, and I really think they're missing out on something pretty special. For this reason, it's one of my biggest guilty pleasures, but I'm tired of feeling guilty about it. This game utterly oozes with charm, and it's a lot of fun if you just learn to roll with some of the punches it throws at you. And by punches, I mean what slaps on the wrist, because I really think a lot of the usual complaints about this game are blown way out of proportion. So today I want to go over this game, give some honest takes, and tell you exactly why I absolutely love Sonic R. I'd first like to give a quick history on the game's background and release. Sonic R was released on the Sega Saturn in 1997.
Introducing Sega Saturn.
Like most other Sonic spin-off games, this one was created by a third-party developer, not Sonic Team. Traveler's Tales, an English software developer known for creating games based on existing IPs like Mickey Mouse and Toy Story, would get to try their hand at yet another Sonic game. Yup, before Square Enix blessed us with this masterpiece of a scene.
Say fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?
Traveler's Tale got some of the first dibs at featuring Mickey Mouse in a video game, because just the year before, they had finished development on Sonic 3D Blast for the Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn. With Sega wanting to showcase the 3D capabilities of the Sega Saturn, they were then assigned to create a game exclusive to that console. This would allow them to not be limited by the previous generation's weaker hardware with a cross-generation game like last time. Because yeah, this console desperately needed it. Looking in hindsight, the Saturn was an extremely malnourished console. Poor little guy. This game's development is actually pretty well documented. There's a YouTube channel by the former director of Traveler's Tales called Game Hut, where techniques, development insight, and technical hardships from the game's development are discussed in pretty great and visual detail. They also have some videos on the development of Sonic 3D Blast, as well as some Disney licensed games they worked on. Be sure to check out this channel if you're into this kind of stuff. I definitely know I am. I could watch these types of videos all day. So Sonic R is a racing game, but not the first racing game in the series. 1994's Sonic Drift for the Game Gear would technically be the first. However, it would never leave Japan until 2005 in the Sonic Gems collection. However, Sonic Drift 2, which came out a year later, would be released internationally, making it the first Sonic racing game anyone outside of Japan could experience. This series of racing games would feature Sonic and friends in cars, which isn't an idea that I hate, but I always thought that it just made more sense for them to run around on foot, because that's like their whole thing. But anyways, while Sonic R isn't the first racing game, it is the first and only one to have characters run around on foot. Something that's kind of a big missed opportunity for the series, I think. I take characters running around looking like they got no kneecaps over cars any day. Technically, there is Sonic Rivals where characters also run around on foot, but I wouldn't exactly call it a racing game. Yes, you do race, but I consider it more of a 1v1 versus game. It isn't quite the same thing, you know what I mean? Plus, we don't talk about Sonic Rivals. It'd be like calling the 2-player speed battle mode of Sonic Adventure 2 a racing game. Yeah, you do race, but it lacks a lot of the qualities of the racing game genre, like laps, items, multiple opponents, you get the idea. But enough talking about the release history of this game. Let's finally start digging into the gameplay. There's a couple versions of this game, so just to clarify, I'll be going over the PC port of Sonic R. It's probably the most accessible version of this game, especially nowadays, but we'll get more into that later. In Sonic R, you play as Sonic R. You race against 4 other opponents, making it a 5-person race. The smaller amount of opponents can be a bit disappointing if you're comparing it to this game's competitor, Mario Kart, which has a maximum of 8 players. My guess is it had to do with not being able to render 8 fully 3D characters at the same time. It'd be a lot cooler if there were 8 players, but I wouldn't say it's anything close to being a deal breaker. Obviously, the goal in any racing game is to get first place, which means outrunning every opponent by using a variety of different tools, like Tonka, except nothing at all like Tonka. You'll find staple Sonic props like springs, which bounce the player straight up to reach taller locations, shields and speed shoes, which can be found inside of these blue ring emblems, and also loop-de-loops, which usually are a bit of a detour to use, but can give you a nice little handful of a certain currency commonly found in the Sonic universe. Because what's a Sonic game without rings? Bad.
I'm Sonic.
This game has trails of rings throughout the level design, which can mainly be used for 2 things. The first and most simple use is for speed pads, which take rings and autopilot you at warp speed for a set distance. The more rings you have, the farther you go. It's a pretty decent way to get a small leap ahead of other opponents, but most of the time it isn't worth it. Because rings have a second, more interesting use, and that's to open locked doors.
Say, fellas, did somebody mention the door?
Each course has a handful of locked doors that display a ring count above. In order to open them, you'll have to collect that specific amount of rings and then walk into it to pay the toll once you have enough. It'll open up and you can either unlock shortcuts, which everyone else has access to once you open it, so you have to be a little bit careful, or it'll give you a Chaos Emerald. Yep, that's right, Chaos Emeralds make an appearance and have a purpose in this game. There are 7 like usual, and you can find a certain number of them per level. Collecting the Chaos Emeralds almost always involves collecting a bunch of rings and then going out of your way to open the locked door to collect it, which can be quite the detour. Because the thing is, you also need to get first place in order to actually add the emerald to your final collection. But it's definitely worth collecting all 7, not only for the challenge, but because doing so unlocks you the ability to play as Super Sonic.
Super Sonic, baby!
Speaking of unlocking characters, there's one more collectible that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the Sonic tokens. They're basically like Chuck E. Cheese tokens, but better. Collecting all 5 hidden throughout each course and finishing the level in first place will give you a challenge race against an unlockable character. If you beat them in a race, you unlock them as a playable character. So let's go over all of the playable characters in this game, because there's definitely some really interesting ones. And by interesting, I mean, what the f? Sonic R has a pretty colorful and interesting cast of characters. You start off with 4 at the beginning and then can unlock up to 10 characters total. The character select screen looks like this when first booting the game. You have Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy unlocked right off the bat. You can also see Dr. Robotnik in the 5th character slot, as well as 4 other character silhouettes all crossed out. With the exception of Dr. Robotnik, who's collected by just finishing the last level in first place, these are the other unlockable characters you get by collecting the Sonic tokens from each level and beating them in a one-on-one race. You got Metal Sonic, Tails, Metal Knuckles, and even Egg Robo. Quite the interesting cast of characters, I think. Some who we've never seen make an additional appearance in any other Sonic game, which is a real shame. And then, as mentioned previously, there's Super Sonic, who's earned by collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds hidden in each of the stages. He definitely takes the most work to unlock, but he's totally worth it because he's absolutely broken and just really fun to use.
Super Sonic, baby!
The metal characters are really one of the coolest parts about this game. Not only do we get to play as Metal Sonic for one of the first times ever, But we also get doppelganger versions of our other main characters, exclusive to this game. I was joking around about Tails Doll earlier, but I actually want to talk about him seriously for just a second. Tails Doll is probably one of the most unintentionally creepy things from the entire Sonic series. He's a staple character in a ton of Sonic-related creepypastas, even though Sonic R is his first and only appearance. I absolutely love how mysterious, unexplained, and out of place he is. He isn't a spiky metal version of one of our main characters like Metal Sonic and Metal Knuckles. He's a stuffed doll with soulless eyes and limp limbs that just hover slightly above the ground. I'm sure this thing gave countless kids nightmares. Everything about him is just so eerie and off-putting. On the other hand, Metal Knuckles is also super interesting. Like Tails Doll, this is the only game to ever feature him, and his design is actually so cool. It was designed by Yuji Uekawa, the legend behind the art for Sonic Adventure. He's the guy whose art most of my thumbnails are based off of. Metal Knuckles' design is honestly so awesome, and I'm surprised it never came back for any additional game. Out of all the Sonic racing games, this one definitely has a top-tier cast of characters. Another unique thing to Sonic R is that each character has their own set of abilities. Sonic is able to double jump, which lets him completely leap over obstacles extremely quickly. Tails can fly for a short amount of time, which allows him to hover over large bodies of water and avoid certain obstacles altogether. Knuckles can glide, which lets him skip huge portions of a few levels. Amy is able to hover above water, but her speed decreases a bit when doing this. She's also able to boost after collecting a handful of rings. Finally, it's worth noting that she can't jump. Dr. Robotnik can also hover above water, but he maintains his speed when doing this pretty well, unlike Amy. Instead of boosting, he's able to shoot bombs at players that can sometimes disrupt their direction, but usually these flat out miss like 90% of the time. Like Amy, he's also unable to jump. Metal Sonic actually kinda sucks. He can't double jump like his hedgehog counterpart, and the single jump he does have has the most hilarious jumping jack animation. He can stay above water for a good couple of seconds before sinking, which is actually kind of useful. But other than this, he really doesn't have any extra abilities. Tails Doll has this weird short hop hover. Out of all the characters with jumps, his is definitely the smallest, but the amount of time he can stay in the air is longer than Tails. Tails Doll can completely glide on water without losing speed, which makes him a pretty great pick for stages with a lot of water. Metal Knuckles can glide similar to normal Knuckles, but where he differs is how he can run above water like Metal Sonic for a few seconds before sinking. Egg Robo can shoot bombs but is unable to jump, similar to Dr. Robotnik, and is just overall faster. Super Sonic is just Sonic, but better. In addition to all of Sonic's abilities, he's also able to run on water, but it slows him down a bit and actually changes his running animation. Each character having their own abilities definitely sets Sonic R apart from other racing games, like Mario Kart, where the only difference is slight stat variation and cosmetics. Although it sets itself up for some weird character balancing, I'd rather have this and have cool abilities than everyone to play almost exactly the same. I'm gonna be straight up, Sonic R can be a pretty unbalanced game when it comes to the characters. Each character varies in stats, and this variation can be pretty big. Super Sonic is the best by far, and then some characters are just straight up bad, like Amy and Robotnik, who drive inside vehicles while everyone else runs around on foot. They have maybe one advantage, like being able to hover above water, while other characters sink and get severely slowed down. This can lead to taking some cool shortcuts other characters might not be able to do. But other than that, these vehicle characters are pretty slow and actually can't even jump. Like, I love Amy's little car, I think it's adorable, but it's pretty slow compared to everyone else. I guess she was supposed to be a character for beginners who can't handle the higher speeds other characters can offer. But in reality, she almost ends up becoming a challenge run character for players who have mastered the game. One of the biggest challenges of Sonic R comes from the character you choose to play as. Playing the game as Sonic is basically easy mode, and it's made even easier if you're playing as Super Sonic, obviously. But playing as Amy? Now that's some hardcore shit. I actually think the fact that the characters are so unbalanced becomes a sort of difficulty selection. Because here's the thing, Sonic R isn't exactly a hard game. That is, if your only goal is to go for first place. It only starts to become difficult if you're trying to go for the tokens and Chaos Emeralds, but even then it isn't that difficult. The easiest way to hunt for collectibles is to go through the course, focus on either the tokens or one of the Chaos Emeralds, and then replay the level again focusing on the next collectible. But try collecting all tokens and Chaos Emeralds in one race? That can definitely be a huge challenge, and I usually try to push myself to get everything in one run if possible. It's basically like when you're taking the groceries inside. You can either take multiple trips like a little or you can grab it all in one go like an absolute machine. The game is as difficult as you want it to be. It just depends on the character you choose to play as and how many things you're trying to collect in a single go. For example, the chattiest of chads are able to use Amy, get all tokens and Chaos Emeralds, and finish the race in first place. Now, I've been talking about difficulty in terms of characters, but the game actually has an easy, normal, and hard mode that you can select from the options menu. So, if the game is still too easy for you, definitely give hard mode a shot. It can feel a bit unfair, especially when you're taking detours for Chaos Emeralds and Sonic tokens, but it can be a pretty rewarding challenge if you can overcome it. Sonic R does something kind of weird though that I don't really like. Once you unlock all 10 characters, they're basically categorized into two groups I like to call Pool A and Pool B. Pool A is the first 5 characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Dr. Robotnik. Pool B are the last 5 characters, Metal Sonic, Tails Doll, Metal Knuckles, Egg Robo, and Super Sonic. When you choose a character, your opponents are always only within the same pool as the character you choose. For example, if you choose a character from Pool A like Tails, your opponent will be the rest of Pool A. You won't be able to go up against Metal Sonic or anyone else from Pool B, and vice versa for Pool B. It isn't the worst thing in the world, except for the fact that playing as any character in Pool B besides Super Sonic means that one of your opponents will always be Super Sonic. And let me tell ya, going up against Super Sonic is bullshit. He's straight up just faster than every character. You have to be extremely careful about opening shortcuts early on in the race, because he'll just use them and widen the gap in front of you even more. My pro tip is to play extremely clean in the first 2 laps, staying as close behind him as possible, and then unlocking the shortcuts on the last lap to sneak in front of him at the last minute. Selecting from Pool B is definitely the more difficult of the two, unless you're playing as Super Sonic. I would have preferred that your opponents were randomized each time, honestly. I really can't think of any reason they developed it like this. It almost sounds like something due to hardware restrictions, but I don't really see it being that difficult to program a random pool of opponents for every race. This is probably one of my biggest nitpicks with the game. Sonic R has a total of 5 stages, which all start with the letter R, because, you know, Sonic R. This type of cleverness definitely shows you that the developers had a 200 IQ brain. There's Resort Island, Radical City, Regal Ruin, Reactive Factory, and Radiant Emerald. These stages are well varied and have awesome theming to them. Resort Island is the iconic bright and sunny first level you'd come to expect in most Sonic games. Radical City is this great mix of urban architecture with some hints of that casino level design that Sonic games are famous for using. Regal Ruin is this ancient Egyptian styled level with a ton of branching and complex level design and tons of secret paths. Reactive Factory is a Robotnik factory with a futuristic design and surrounded by lots of water. And finally, Radiant Emerald is pretty much the Rainbow Road of Sonic R. It's colorful and has a very straightforward but long level design. So I mentioned that there are only 5 stages, but 7 Chaos Emeralds. So this means that some stages have multiple Chaos Emeralds in them. Each stage has 2 Chaos Emeralds, except for Resort Island and Radiant Emerald, the first and last stage respectively. Resort Island only has 1 Chaos Emerald, while Radiant Emerald actually doesn't have any. It's the only stage without a Chaos Emerald or even a challenge race against an unlockable character. There were a couple of pretty interesting features added to the PC port of Sonic R, mostly affecting stages. A time of day system was added, which basically just changed the skybox of the level to varying times of day. It's a nice little feature that gives some variety to the levels each time you play it. And then, more interestingly, a weather system. There's rain, which reduces traction, and then snow, which reduces the traction even more, having players slide around like on ice skates, especially when making sharp turns. The most interesting thing it does is freeze over any bodies of water, allowing players to run on top of it. This makes it a lot easier to reach certain shortcuts and get hidden collectibles. These are all features that give the few levels this game has great variety and replayability. So what is the actual biggest flaw of Sonic R? It's the fact that it ends. Okay, no, but for real, it's the fact that it ends so soon, because it's actually a pretty short game. Like I said, there's only 5 stages in this game, which is a real shame. It would have been cool if there were at least 7 levels, one for each of the Chaos Emeralds in the game. I think that would have been the perfect amount of levels and would have led to much better pacing overall. It's kind of weird how the amount of Chaos Emeralds in each stage can range from either 0 to 2. It makes it seem like the Chaos Emeralds were almost added as an afterthought after designing all of the levels. I don't exactly mind that this game is so short though. You can complete the game in about an hour easily, which is the perfect amount of time for a bite-sized Sonic spin-off game, I feel. But if you're still hungry for more Sonic R, which I know I always am, there's a few fun additional modes. The first set are time attack modes. Normal time attack is exactly what it sounds like. You go through each course by yourself and try to get the best possible time. It can be good for challenging yourself to get faster and faster, or just trotting along the stages without the pressure of opponents. Reverse time attack mode lets you go through each stage backwards. This always trips me up, but it's actually a really interesting mode that breathes new life into each stage. And trust me, this game definitely needs it with how few stages there are. Unfortunately, this mode doesn't pit you against any opponent, so it's a bit lonely. Get 5 balloons has you explore each stage in search of 5 balloons. It took me a while to clear the first stage I tried this in, because I didn't expect the balloons to be as well hidden as they were. A big tip I have for this mode is to go through the stage normally, and then when you get to the finish line, go backwards. There's a lot of balloons hiding behind things, so going backwards lets you see the stage again from the opposite angle. Tag 4 characters is actually a really fun mode that has you chase 4 other characters around a stage. It's almost like a game of hide and seek tag, except you can see their location on the map, so you're basically just hunting down each opponent xenomorph style.
No, 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 no.
Just run into the player and you tag them, get all 4 and you win. The second set of modes come from the multiplayer mode, which has 2 games in it. The first is your standard race mode, where you race for first place. You can go up to 4 players in the Sonic Gems collection port, but only 2 on the Saturn and PC port. There aren't any CPU players in this mode, so it's a more focused, no BS race. It's a pretty fun time with friends for sure, as long as you don't take it too seriously. The second multiplayer mode is a competitive version of Get 5 Balloons. Similar to the single player version, you and your opponents go through the stages to be the first to find 5 hidden balloons. It's actually a really fun multiplayer exploration based mode that I enjoy quite a lot. The controls are probably one of the most harshly criticized things. And I get it, this is a video game. A video game. Gameplay is important. But I think there's a huge flaw in people's expectations of the controls when going into this game. Most characters, besides a couple, run on foot, so you'd probably expect them to control similar to how they would in Sonic Adventure, but they don't. You steer these characters like you would a car, which can be a bit misleading from what you might expect by just looking at them. I think what happens to most people is that the models and animations of the characters being on foot deceives them into thinking they control differently. For example, if you play as Amy, who actually drives a car, your expectations of the controls probably fit a lot better to the model and animations of the character. Amy is in a car and she steers like she's in a car, but then the majority of the cast are on foot and still steer like they're in cars. I really think once you get over this disconnect of controls to animations, the way the game handles just kind of clicks. There's another somewhat deceiving thing I see a lot of people misunderstanding, because there's a bit of nuance to it. Bumping into walls in most other games would normally slow down the player, so instinctually you'd feel like you should be avoiding bumping into walls. This is something that is absolutely unavoidable. But in this game, it doesn't really have any consequences. You don't lose any speed. It can actually be used to bounce yourself into the correct direction sometimes. So every once in a while, you just have to use the wall bouncing to your advantage. In terms of presentation, for its time, it was extremely impressive. The way the environments fade in as you approach them was something that took a lot of brains to program at the time. But even looking at this game today, I still think it holds up pretty decently. No, I'm serious. The low poly look is definitely charming and still used in a lot of indie-style games today. Characters are really compact and easy to tell apart. A few have some small interesting details on them, like how Knuckles has this buckle bracelet thing on his glove, for example. Menus are overall serviceable. I feel like they could have been a bit snappier, but I think the theming is pretty good. Lots of checkerboard, symbolizing how this is a racing game. The only thing that doesn't really hold up are the animations. The running animations are pretty stiff and kind of goofy looking, but this was in that territory of some of the first 3D games, so things like this were still being figured out. I really think that this game does a great job with its visuals overall. Every level is super vibrant and really gives us a taste of what we were in for in the near future when it came to other 3D Sonic games. This was one of the first 3D Sonic games, so you have to imagine how mind-blowing it was back when this game first came out. Guys, I know I say this for like every review I do for Sonic, but the music in this game slaps so hard. It's seriously one of my favorite soundtracks to any video game ever. It's basically like 80s aerobic exercise workout video music with a splash of city pop. It has no business being this good. The singer TJ Davis absolutely belts these songs with an unreal amount of passion. The lyrics can be a bit cheesy, but sometimes you just gotta eat the cheese and enjoy it for what it is. What each song is about usually doesn't directly reference anything Sonic related. It more so vaguely references the feeling and themes of each level. This makes it so that each vocal track is a standalone song. You can listen to it outside of the context of Sonic, which I always thought was really cool. Most vocal tracks are love songs, which some people complain about. But come on, love makes the world go round, baby. And it's better than lyrics directly referencing what's happening in that moment of the Sonic lore.
What are you doing here? I heard you on a quest for the Master Emerald. You know me and you don't get along. I don't think that's the point right now, Knuckles.
Every track in this game is legendary. Whenever I listen to this game's soundtrack in my free time, the skip button is never pressed. It's got high BPM, an upbeat attitude, amazing instrumentation, and extremely talented vocals from TJ Davis. It all factors into the thrill of the race and helps give the game such a big personality. Earlier on, I brought up the talking point of accessibility, so let's finally get around to talking about that. Sonic R would be the only original Sonic game on the Saturn, as 3D Blast was developed for the Genesis like I mentioned earlier, and Sonic Jam is essentially a ported collection of the original trilogy from the Genesis. The Saturn was kind of a sad console for Sonic. A year after its Saturn release, the game would be ported to PC with some improvements to controls, tweaking in character stats, and extra features which we explained earlier. Sonic R was also released in the Sonic Gems collection on the GameCube back in 2005, which is actually how I was able to play this game back in the day. It's worth noting that this version of the game is a port of the PC version, so all of the quality of life improvements can be found here as well. This would be the last time the game would see a re-release, which is kind of an issue because the Gems collection, like I said, came out in 2005, which is a long time ago. We'll always have the PC version, but there's actually a bunch of compatibility issues with most modern day computers you'll have to overcome. To play the game, you'll need to tweak some settings and probably use some mods, which can be a bit inconvenient. I do think that this game needs some kind of modern port though, because with each day that goes by, the accessibility of this game becomes smaller and smaller. Sonic R just makes me happy. It's colorful, energetic, and an overall fun game that I love going back to play from time to time. It doesn't take up a lot of your time, but the time spent playing is an absolute blast, at least for me. A lot of naysayers for this game will have you believe that this game is unplayable because the controls take a little bit of getting used to, but I think this is more of an issue of not understanding what this game actually is. It's a racing game, and it controls and plays like a racing game. Especially in the controls department, I feel like this is a mentality that a lot of people just can't seem to overcome. When considering all of the Sonic racing games, this one is definitely one of the better ones in my book. It may be a bit rough around the edges, but Sonic R is still such a fun time. You just have to give it a chance. Hey everyone, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content similar to this. In the comments below, let me know what you think of Sonic R. And to continue this discussion even further, make sure to join the community Discord, link to that in the description. And finally, I'd love to give a huge shout out to my backers. You all are the #1 reason I'm able to keep doing these videos on a weekly basis. If you're also interested in backing this channel and getting some cool perks, press the join button below this video or go into the description and press the membership link. Details on all the perks are there. And without further ado, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Peace.
Wake up,